Drafting and managing Scottish amendments. This is a demonstration on what the interface for a new drafting and amending tool could look like. It demos what functionality and key concepts will be included as part of the drafting amendments process, namely how to draft amendments in line. It also includes an overview on how amendments can be managed in the system. There is still quite a bit of work to be done to this area to satisfy all amendment-related requirements, including how to draft traditionally formatted amendments and convert them in line. I shall start this demonstration from the dashboard. The user can go straight to amendments when they first log into the dashboard by finding the relevant bill and selecting the Amendment button. This will load the structure view of the latest published version of the bill. As seen throughout the rest of the wireframes, the header contains the short title as well as the stage it is at. Ignore the tabs across the top for now as they evolved following feedback from the user testing, but these older wireframes were not updated to reflect these. There are various options to allow the user to skip to the relevant provision in the bill. They can insert a page number and/or line or clause number. They can search for a particular word or phrase. This includes section numbers or schedule numbers if it is a particularly large bill. Or they can find the provision in the structure view. The plus signs next to the provisions allow the user to expand out the structural element. For example, the section if they want to see the content before selecting to amend it. If the user wants to insert a new provision, they can select this button in the top right. In this example, I will click on Section 1 to amend. This opens up the editor view containing the text of the selected provision. If the user had selected Insert New Provision, this editor window would be blank. If you know the exact page number and line number for the provision you are amending, it is possible to supply them in the fields at the top here as a quick way of jumping the cursor to the relevant position in the text. We initially thought about that a user could specify what type of amendment they were creating using these buttons at the top of the editor window. However, following user testing, this didn't make sense apart from when they want to leave out a provision, so these functions will need further thought. To the right of the editor is the amendment metadata, beginning with the member who is asking for the amendment, any supporters who wish to put their name against the amendment as well, and topic. This is a concept that will allow users to group amendments together according to similar themes, instructions or policies depending on who they are drafting the amendment or amendments for and how they like to draft. For example, the government might instruct Parley Council to draft amendments based on a particular policy decision. There may be more than one amendment required to fulfil this instruction, in which case the drafter could create their own topic and make all amendments relating to this topic, and later use this topic as a way of filtering the amendments for ease of management. Topics are default so that they are always private. This means that only the user and others in their group can view them. This allows any user in the system to view the topics and could well be useful for Parliament clerks when they come to grouping the amendments for debate. Tags work in much the same way as topics, and following user testing, we agreed to remove this, keeping topics only instead. Explanatory statements are only used in the House of Commons. However, it might be useful to record against Scottish amendments, and as such we have left them in the wireframes. Editor Notes is a free text field to record extra bits of information that would not be published and are defaulted so that they are private. This means that only the user and users in their group can view them, although similar to topics they can be shared with other users of the system by unchecking the private tick box. There is a requirement to allow users to draft amendments in advance of an amendment stage. This stage drop-down will default to the current stage. However, users can change this to a future stage if they wish, and it stops the amendment appearing in the current stage. It is expected there will be some manual intervention to ensure the amendment fits into the new version of the text when the amendment stage has been reached. However, this will be explored in more detail during development. There are a number of save options that we wanted the users to feedback on during testing. Cancel, which will return the user to the amendment page without saving any amendments. Save as draft, which will save a version of any amendments captured in this window as a draft version. Save and submit will immediately submit amendments created on this view to the Legislation Office, This was not popular with users and is unlikely to be an option on the real system. Save and lodge, a button which should only be available to Parliament clerks who may want to lodge an amendment as soon as they have created it rather than making it a two-step process. And save and create alternate version. This would save any amendments just created and then clear the editor window of any changes so that the user could draft some alternate amendments if they were experimenting with different ways of achieving the same aim. The date and time information will only be used by Parliament clerks who may need to copy up an amendment that had been lodged earlier in the day, and they want to keep the date time at the physical time it was lodged as opposed to the date time it was copied into the system. Now I will demonstrate how inline amendments could work in the new system. We envisage it will look a lot like track changes, with the text that is being left out being clearly marked as such and the text to be inserted clearly marked again. When creating new amendments, it is possible to create more than one at the same time, within the same provision. To do this, the user would make as many alterations to the text as they see fit. Here we have one example and another example. When they are ready, they would click Preview Paginated View. For each separate amendment in the provision, the system will generate an individual amendment in traditional format in this paginated view. In this example, you can see how the section, page and line number can be derived, as well as what the text should be left out and what text should be inserted. However, it's not quite correct in that it only shows you one of the amendments. The real system would show you as many amendments that have been made in that provision. The system will be programmed to recognise all the different notations for writing traditionally formatted amendments so that the need to update these are very rare. However, no system is expected to be perfect, and there will be an opportunity to edit the traditional formatted amendment if a small tweak is necessary. This is the version that appears on the marshalled list, so it needs to adhere to Parliament's rules and guidelines. If an amendment has been modified in the traditional format, this will be flagged to Parliament clerks, so they can verify the changes do not have substantial differences to the inline equivalent, which will be used to update the bill. The grey boxes below will contain any amendment already recorded against this provision, so that you can check that you're not duplicating an amendment already created by someone else. If you're a drafting lawyer from the PCO, you will be able to see draft amendments created by you or others in your group, lodged amendments created by you or others in your group. This includes those that are waiting to be accepted by the Legislation Office and those that have been accepted but have not yet appeared on an official amendment list. Unpublished amendments created by anyone. These are amendments that have been appeared on an official amendment list somewhere. If you're a Parliament clerk, you will be able to see draft amendments created by you or others in your team. For example, you will not be able to see draft amendments that have been created by the PCO which haven't been submitted for lodging yet. Lodged amendments. These are both amendments submitted by the PCO that haven't been accepted yet by the Legislation Office, and also amendments that have been accepted but have not yet appeared on an official amendment list yet. Unpublished amendments. These are amendments that have been accepted for lodging and are already on an official amendment list. Once a user has completed amendments for that particular provision, they can jump to the previous provision or the next provision to start recording amendments to these other provisions, or use the structure menu on the left-hand side to quickly jump to the next provision they want to amend, or click Return to My Amendment so they can perform further options on their amendments. There will be an area in the system where you can access all amendments that you have the privilege to see. For instance, if you are a drafting lawyer for the PCO, you will only be able to view amendments that you or someone else in your team has drafted at any status, and for amendments drafted by someone outside of your team, you will only be able to view them once they have been published and are available to the public. If you are a Parliament clerk, you will be able to view amendments that you or someone in your team has drafted at any status, and other teams' amendments once they have been submitted for lodging, i.e. you will not be able to view another team's draft amendments. This wireframe shows all amendments for the Alcohol Minimum Pricing Scotland Bill. There are a number of different filter options available. First of all, the user can decide whether to view all amendments that they have the privilege to see, or limit to their own, or to the amendments drafted within their team. They can also choose to view amendments for a particular member, with the option to include amendments that are recorded as supporters as well. You might want to search by amendment type. You might only be interested in viewing amendments of a particular status, for example, all draft amendments or all published amendments. You can also filter by topic if this is a function that you or someone in your team has used. You can choose to filter by stage. The default view will be for the current stage, but it will also be possible to view amendments from a previous or even future stage. You can also filter by section or schedule if you want to see all amendments for a particular provision. You might want to filter the list by date to show all amendments that have been published in the last 2 days, or drafted today, or withdrawn over the last week, for example. And finally, you might want to filter by party, which will rely on this information being derived from the member who lodged the amendment. Depending on your filter selection, there will be a list of amendments displayed. Each amendment in the list will display its unique ID, assigned by the system, the section, page and line number where applicable, the member lodging it, the topic it has been assigned to, if applicable, and the date time. Against each amendment, there are some available actions. These could be edit. This will depend on what type of user you are and what status the amendment is at. For example, the PCO would not be able to amend a published amendment, although if you did need to amend it, they can lodge another one in substitution or contact the legislation office if they wanted to make an insubstantial change. Delete. Again, this will depend on what status the amendment is at and what type of user you are. If you had drafted an amendment which hadn't been lodged yet, you would be able to delete it and reopen it later if required. However, if you had lodged an amendment, you would have to contact the legislation office in order to withdraw it. Withdraw. This option is likely to be only available to Parliament clerks, who can withdraw lodged and published amendments on behalf of the PCO if required. And lodge, in this case incorrectly labelled as tabled. This option is probably only relevant to the PCO, who will need to submit their amendment to the legislation office for lodging. Selecting this action will do this. In addition to actions being available on an amendment-by-amendment basis, it will also be possible to perform bulk actions by using the checkboxes down the side. The user can select the bulk actions at the top, which includes the options to edit, an option to select more than one amendment to update at the same time. This will be complicated to build and further work is required to ensure this requirement is fully understood. Withdraw, again likely to be only an option for Parliament clerks, although whether a bulk action function to withdraw amendments is necessary has yet to be validated. Delete, as long as the user has authority and amendments are at the correct status, they can delete more than one amendment at the same time. Lodge, incorrectly labelled as tabled here, it is feasible that a drafting lawyer will want to lodge more than one amendment at one time. Other options we might want to consider include add to topic, if the user would like to add other amendments to a particular topic as a bulk action rather than opening them one by one, and add supporter, again another quick way to add a supporter to more than one amendment at the same time rather than opening them up one by one. The other options not yet discussed are create group, which is related to creating grouping lists by Parliament clerk, and so this functionality wouldn't be available to drafting lawyers. Create topic, which is how a user would go about creating amendments for a particular topic. Both these functions have not been fully explored, but acknowledge that we have requirements around these areas which need further consideration. And then there is export amendments. This button will allow users to export amendments in various formats. The most useful one for end users is probably going to be PDF, but is likely to include HTML and XML. The options for exporting amendments would be as traditionally formatted lists, appearing as they would in a marshalled list, for example, but made clear that it was not an official amendment list. This could be used by drafting lawyers to collate a bundle of amendments relating to a particular instruction and sending it to the relevant person for review. This is an example of what a list of traditionally formatted amendments could look like. Alternatively, now that amendment data is being captured in line, there is no reason why extracts of the bill, or the whole bill, cannot be printed, showing the effect that selected amendments would make. Here is an example of a couple of amendments inserted into the text of the bill. This is the end of the demonstration for drafting and managing Scottish amendments.